Hi, I'm Naisha. I work with Marijuana Care Clinic. I'm the office manager. I work with Dr. Cooper. We're a two-people team, so it's just us two. I'm just going to talk about the process briefly, like what we require, what the pricing is, and then if anybody needs any business cards or a brochure, just raise your hand after I'm done, and I'll stop by quietly, and I'll drop some off. So to get your medical marijuana card, we require three things. You have to be a Florida resident. If you're not a permanent resident, we do also accept snowbirds. We can talk more about what we require for the snowbirds. If you are a snowbird, you can definitely ask me what we require you to bring in. But as a Florida resident, a permanent one, you do have to have a valid Florida's driver's license or ID with your current address on there, just because they require that for the Department of Health. And then we also require you to have a qualifying condition. So there's, just to name a couple off the top of my head that are pretty popular within our community is anxiety, chronic pain, PTSD, depression, fibromyalgia, arthritis, and the list goes on. It's helped so many different conditions, so many different patients, but we do require you to have a condition. If you don't see a medical doctor currently, we can definitely refer you to someone that can help you get medical records, because we do require your medical records to not be older than 2 years old, so they do have to be recent. The reason for that is we want to make sure someone is still treating your condition. We're just prescribing you the cannabis, so we're not treating your actual condition. We want to make sure someone's following up with that. So the medical records always have to be 2 years up to date. And again, we can also help you obtain medical records. We have medical release forms that we can fax over to doctors' offices, and we can keep in communication with them if you want us to. So just those three things. We have to have a valid ID, a qualifying condition, and medical records. The visit for the fee is $159. That's just for the 7-month prescription. We can only prescribe you 210 days worth of prescriptions at a time. Dr. Cooper is going to go more into what those prescriptions, what do they consist of. But it's a full 7-month script. We don't charge extra for if you need to increase your milligrams, because what we do is prescribe you a certain amount of milligrams. So if you ever need an increase, if you ever need a new recommendation, a new suggestion about, for your relief, we're always here for you. So if anybody needs a business card, anything like that, so just reach out to me. It's $159 for the office fee and $77 with the state.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for having us here. Really honored and blessed to be at the Enzian, and I get to talk about one of my favorite topics. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. All right, just let me know if I suddenly fade out. So my name is Dr. Cooper, and I am a cannabis physician, amongst other things. My background, a little bit about me, is that before I moved to America, I actually did traditional Chinese medicine in Vietnam. So when we actually work with cannabis in different formulations over there. And then I moved to the US, and I did my training in internal medicine. And then cannabis became legal in the state of Florida. So I decided that I was going to spend about half my time, which I still do, doing internal medicine, and the other half of my time doing cannabis medicine. Beginning of the week, I'm an internal med doctor. By the end of the week, I'm passing out medical marijuana cards and educating patients. And so, all right, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about cannabis. Wait, got to turn it on. And on. All right, what is cannabis? So cannabis is a genus of plants, and it includes 3 different species. Technically, everything that we know about is actually sativas, but we won't get into that. So cannabis sativa, the kind of tall, skinnier plants, cannabis indica, and the ruderalis. So, whoa, got really loud. All right, so a lot of people are very confused about what is the difference between the CBD that I'm buying over the counter and the CBD or cannabis that I'm getting out of the dispensary. And this chart answers that. It can be very, very confusing. So the story that I like to tell is that think of cannabis as mom, and she had 2 babies. One was hemp, and one was marijuana. Think about hemp. It's kind of like the bastard child, okay? It's got CBD, but little to no THC in it, okay? It was bred specifically to be that way. So it's used in industrial things like ropes and things to build buildings and even in food. Now, marijuana, on the other hand, has CBD plus THC plus flavonoids plus terpenes. These are all the major components of marijuana, and they all have to work together. Even the word CBD, we'll get a little bit into it, there are many types of CBDs, and you actually need that THC to activate CBD, and this is why marijuana is so much more potent than the hemp CBD, especially depending on your condition. So, we kind of already talked a little bit about the components of marijuana that include CBD, THC, flavonoids, and terpenes. And this is kind of a chart of it. So you can see there are many different types of CBD, CBN, CBG, CBC, and then you can see there's a pointer here. I got it. All right, so you can see here, this is the different CBDs, this is flavonoids and terpenes. And then this is just kind of a little chart you guys may, if you've kind of dabbled a little bit in over-the-counter CBD, you've probably seen CBD isolate, broad spectrum, full spectrum. This kind of ties it all together. So typically, when you see CBD isolate, this is typically usually hemp-derived CBD. And then here's CBD, some terpenes, flavonoids, and then this, when you see this with that THC, that's typically what you're getting in the dispensary. All right, so what's the difference between CBD and THC? So this is a great chart, just talking a little bit about the characteristics of THC and CBD. So obviously we all know about THC. THC is a psychoactive component of marijuana. Basically, this is what causes the euphoria, okay? But you'd be surprised that everybody always thinks THC is a magic molecule and they want the most THC, the highest amount of THC possible when they go to the dispensary to pick up products. But I don't know if some of you know a medication called Marinol. So Marinol is pure THC. When it was created, it's a pharmaceutical drug. When it was created, everybody thought, oh my God, all the patients are gonna go crazy, they're gonna break into the pharmacies and steal Marinol. Well, we can barely give it away to the cancer patients, and it does not cause any euphoria. So this was our first hint that it's more than just THC. You actually need the CBD to activate the THC, and it goes on the other end of the spectrum as well. So we have a medication, it's one of the newer ones, it's basically a bunch of CBDs smushed into one pill. Okay, there's no THC in it. It's used for seizures, but it does not control seizures nearly as well as cannabis does because you need a touch of that THC to activate that CBD. So this is another chart just talking a little bit about the difference between CBD and THC, and you'll see that there are a lot of overlapping properties. Both can help with nausea, CBD a little bit more anti-inflammatory, which if you guys want to take a peek at that later. This is what I was talking about with CBD. There are many different types of CBDs, okay? There's CBC, CBCA. I know that's probably really tiny and you can't really read it, but I promise you this is from the internet, and if you just look up CBD wheel, I don't know why I didn't put the website on there. Usually I put the website on there, but you can see the different types of CBDs, and this can help you to target what you're treating, what you're looking for. All right, so going back to, I talked about the different parts of marijuana, right? CBD, THC, flavonoids, and terpenes. So terpenes, a lot of you may not have heard about terpenes. Terpenes are actually what make up the strain and what help it to do what it does, why some strains work better for certain conditions as opposed to others. This is one of the, I like this one because it kind of talks about some of the main terpenes. There's pinene, linalool, beta-caryophyllene, myrcene, limonene. You can see here, it's actually found in multiple plants. This is why sometimes when you're using cannabis, this is why there might be a little bit of a lemon flavor to it or a citrusy taste to it, or a kind of a tree leafy taste to it. It's because of the flavonoids and terpenes that are present in that strain. Leafly is actually a fantastic source of information about cannabis if you guys don't already know about it. I like this because this kind of is a hint about indicas and sativas, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. So, the sativas, the get up and go type of marijuana, energizing. You can see it's more on the left end over there. There's kind of the terpene profiles that are more like this, as opposed to the indicas that have more of these in them. So, why does cannabis make you feel better? Why does it make you feel good? How does it work in the body? The answer is something called the endocannabinoid system. There's a whole entire network in your body that was built to respond to cannabis. CB receptors, CB1, CB2, it responds to THC and CBD, and it was actually relatively newly figured out. There was a physician in Israel in the 1960s who basically wanted to figure out why cannabis worked. And he worked his way backwards and found this whole entire system. And we're learning more and more about it now. In fact, there are more than just CB1 and CB2 receptors. There are many of them. It's maybe a little bit for this discussion, but these are some of the newer receptors that we're finding. And if you notice, this system innervates all of the different systems. This is why cannabis can be good for anxiety. It can be good for depression. It can be good for pain. There's even anti-cancer type properties to cannabis. It brings down inflammation. And in my experience, cannabis is one of the most potent and effective ways of treating neuropathic pain. Neuropathic pain is classically very difficult to treat, common in diabetics and a few other conditions. We've got 2 medications, that's it. 2 medications, but cannabis treats it so well. So, not to bore you with molecular biology, the reason that I bring this up, the CB receptor and the CBD and the THC, is because it's useful to explain how that when you're trying, there are many different cannabis products that you can try, right? Different strengths, different strains. A lot of people are like, well, I don't know, I'm a little nervous. I don't want to get too high. Well, there's actually an antidote. I don't know if you've ever heard of Narcan. Narcan is if you overdose on certain opiates, it's a rescue pen, right? That will help to neutralize that so you don't stop breathing. Well, there's an antidote. If you ever use a cannabis product and you don't like how you feel, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel too great, I feel a little woozy, because actually sometimes it can cause headaches. Sometimes you can take too much of it and have a bad response to a certain terpene in it. The antidote is to take a higher CBD product. So I kind of like to call it the rescue pen. I always tell my patients, especially if they're newbies and they've never used cannabis before. And I have patients from 16 years old to 99 years old. I have 90-year-olds who have come in and I'm like, look, I hate all these medications. I need something for pain, but I'm scared. I don't want to get high. Okay, that's probably the most common thing I hear. I mean, not that euphoria is such a horrible side effect, but for the older patients, they're like, well, I don't know if I want this. I'm like, you don't have to worry about trying. We can start low and go slow, but there's always an out. Buy that high CBD vape pen, keep it in your Band-Aid box, and if you ever don't like how you feel, just vape on that, and that will help neutralize it. And the science, getting back to this, is basically, so you have the receptor, and THC binds to the receptor and causes a whole bunch of things to happen. So when it causes those things to happen, sometimes some people don't like how that feels. Well, you can see here that CBD is a negative allosteric modulator. Basically, it helps to kind of push off the THC, and the THC goes and binds to another receptor and causes a different cascade of events. So that's how basically the antidote, so to speak, works. All right, so how do you use cannabis, especially? So most of us are familiar with the good old-fashioned smokable marijuana. Smokable is what we call it in the registry. If you get your cannabis card, it's all I'm going to say, since this is being recorded, is that politicians design the system, not clinicians. So the idiosyncrasies are unique, so to speak. But the flower, when you burn the flower, the classic burning flower. So we do have that available. Okay, we call it smokable. So these are some of the various routes that are available in the state of Florida right now. So you have your inhalation routes. Inhalation includes vaping, and it's sort of like you have these bank accounts when you get your card, and we can explain it to you when you come in. But the science, talking about that part. So any inhalation route, whether it's smokable or vaping, what's great about medication delivery that way is that it hits you within 5 minutes. But the problem is that it peaks at an hour and wears off after 2 to 3 hours. So if you're only smoking cannabis, which most people are unless they have access to dispensary products or been to another state or something like that, so medication delivery is going to be up and down. You got to smoke all day, you got to vape all day, and it's not always convenient when you're at work. And if you think about it, there are a lot of people who go, your life, they're waiting until after they're done with work to use cannabis. What about that whole day? What about that day when you were stressed at work and you needed to take the edge off the day? Because if you're too anxious, how are you going to concentrate? If you're in pain during the day, how are you going to function nearly as well? So you're literally missing out on half of your life. And there are ways that you can use cannabis and not be impaired. And I can kind of give you a little bit of background on that. So inhalation, vaping, quick onset, quick offset. Then getting into the sublinguals, the tinctures. This is that oil that you put underneath your tongue. A lot of people get it confused with the CBD oil, but it's used the same way. So what you do is basically ground up cannabis. Everything you're getting in the dispensary is from marijuana, okay? So it's a liquid that you put underneath your tongue and you hold it for 15 to 45 seconds and then you can swallow it. It goes directly into your bloodstream from there. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes to kick in, but once it kicks in, it lasts for 6 hours. This is why I tell my patients, you may maybe be one of those wake and bakers, right? First thing you do is you need to smoke or vape. Well, if you chase it with a tincture right afterwards, by the time that vaping or smoking wears off, then the tincture is going to be kicking in and you're going to have longer medication delivery so you don't have to smoke all day at work or whatever you're doing during the day. So I call that stacking or combining your medications. And then we talk about the other oral formulations, things like pills. We don't actually quite have edibles. That's a whole nother topic, okay? But pills, we'll stick with pills are processed in the body the same way that edibles are. Broken down by the stomach, activated in the liver, okay? Everybody's heard the classic story of take a bite of the brownie, nothing happens, take a bite, nothing happens, and boom, you're on the floor. So we've all seen it in the movies or maybe experienced it ourselves. But anyways, so the reason for this is because it takes about an hour for it to kick in. But once it kicks in, it can last up to 9 hours. So that's how edibles work. And although you can't buy edibles in the store right now, you can actually make them using concentrate, and we can get into that if you decide to come into the clinic or a little homework, or maybe if you've watched some Netflix films. So, and then the other route of delivery that we have are the topicals. So about 1.5 years ago, when I did cannabis certifications, I almost never included that on my recommendation. They were terrible. But now I include it on every single one of my recommendations. The topicals in the state of Florida have come a long ways. People think that it doesn't really work, but certain dispensaries, not to be named up here, have better topicals than others, and it does work for localized pain. Patches can work locally if it's put on an area, like a fatty area like your back. But if you put patches like on your wrist, your inguinal area where birth control goes, backs of knees, tops of feet, anywhere where your veins are readily accessible, you can actually do systemic delivery of medication. This is great if you have to be somewhere for a long period of time. And the other benefit of the patches is that it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. It's what we call a body high as opposed to a mind high, i.e. you're not likely to be impaired from it. So it's a great way to be able to use medication for a long period of time. And some of those patches are reusable as well. You could put it on for 2 hours, take it off, not look at it, come back to it, and still have whatever hours are left on that patch. So what are the types of marijuana and how do I choose my medication? So I tell patients that there are two ways of looking at marijuana. This is the old school classic way that probably most of you are familiar with. Indicas and sativas, okay? This nomenclature is actually pretty outdated. Technically, they're all sativas, blah, 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 but we have the system. This is what we have from the 1950s. So everybody who uses cannabis should be fluent in this because you'll see this at all the dispensaries. So indica, couch, sedating type of marijuana, sleepy type of marijuana, sativa, the get up and go. So those are the two main breeds of marijuana. And then hybrids or mixtures between the two. Usually it's a hybrid sativa, a hybrid indica. And that's where all these fun names come from. So if there are any of you in the audience who don't know anything about what we're talking about right now, you've probably heard of the crazy strain names, things like Granddaddy Purple, Pineapple Express, things like that. This is what it's based off of, okay? So when you hear those crazy names like Skywalker, Sour Diesel, LA Confidential, what you should say to yourself is, okay, what you should ask the dispensary person or think, what type of cannabis is this? If it's Granddaddy Purple, they're gonna tell you it's an indica, in the couch. Pineapple Express, hybrid sativa. They're gonna tell you 9 Pound Hammer, hybrid indica. That's how you sort out all those crazy names. And there's no way you'll ever memorize all of those names because they literally make them up like every couple of minutes. There's some that are tried and true that have been around for a long time, right, that many of us know, but there are new ones like Yellow Brick Road and like Pineapple Express, Hybrid of Hawaiian. And so getting into the other way that you can look at cannabis. So this is the new age way of looking at it. This is a scientific way of looking at it. And this can help you to be able to predict how, at least a starting point, on how to predict how you're going to respond to cannabis to a certain degree. So you have THC and CBD ratios. You're going to see a 1 CBD to 1 THC, a 5 CBD to 1 THC, 1 CBD to 4 THC. What this helps to predict is impairment, okay? Whether or not you're going to get euphoric. It's a starting point. So the rule of thumb is that if that CBD is higher than that THC, you're not going to get euphoric off of it. You're not going to get high, but you can still get relief. If it's a 1-to-1 ratio, you're not going to be impaired off of it, unless you have some weird liver enzyme deficiency or some sort of metabolism issue. I pretty much guarantee you're not going to get euphoric off of it. It's only when the THC is higher than the CBD that you start to run the risk of impairment, and that varies from patients to patients. Like my 100-year-old grandma, who's Vietnamese, has never had an alcoholic drink, only takes her a tiny bit of THC to feel like she's falling, as opposed to my old Vietnam War veteran who's been smoking since the 1960s and is practically made of cannabis. So that part I can't predict, okay? But I can give you a starting point where I can tell you that you can go to work and not be impaired if that CBD ratio is higher than that THC. And so this is just another way of kind of illustrating some of those ratios. So any questions on that? I know that was kind of a lot of information I kind of packed into there. You guys are good? Because I've got nothing else unless there are any specific questions. I'm sorry, I can't really see in the light, so wave your hand. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I didn't even see, I'm staring right at you, and I didn't even see you. Ooh, that's a tough question. Yeah. That's a tough question. So, it's a tough question because when you get drugs, you're a veterinarian, right?
Yeah, and how did you get it?
I'm not as familiar with veterinarian licenses, obviously, there's anything like an allopathic or osteopathic condition. So, you don't get drug tested for your DEA. And nobody asks me for my DEA when I have a cannabis law.
Okay.
So I can maybe have to consult
Yeah.
a lawyer for that and see if this answer, but I can tell you that for mine, it didn't affect anything.
Okay, thanks.
It's don't ask, don't tell. So it's really when there are a couple other things. Remember, cannabis is still a Schedule I drug.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you may run into is that if you have a federal job, so where you work for the federal government, or if they take federal money, then you're subject to federal law.
Okay.
So it's sort of like flying with cannabis, right? The official answer is no, consult a lawyer, the official answer. But when you get into a claim, right, you're governed by federal law. So you should never travel with anything else.
Oh, it moves. I'm so sorry. I was just yelling, sorry. Oh, I had no idea. Any other, oh wait, I see you. Hi, no, that's nothing to be sorry about. This is what I'm here for. I love doing stuff like this.
Perfect. I have a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with a couple things. So would I talk to their office about sending it to your office?
So for getting records, we can do that one of two ways. If you want, you can ask your doctor, can I have a copy of my records? Just make sure that it states my conditions and that they should give it to you. But sometimes they want the money and they'll charge you $1 a page. So the way to work around that, if they decide to do that, is that we can request medical records from them. We have a medical release form, and we have an incognito one, so it doesn't have cannabis written all over it, because if you don't want to share with your other doctor, clinicians, whoever else is treating you, we can do just a general one where it says Dr. Cooper. If they look me up, I'm in internal medicine. Or if you want to tell them you're using cannabis, then that's your prerogative as well. There's only very specific situations where I really kind of urge patients to let their other provider or clinician know what they're doing. So just getting the records, we can request them, or you can bring them in yourself. Up to you, whichever is easier.
And would we ask that for sign an appointment?
It will help. You don't have to have them at the appointment, but it definitely helps. It makes your life easier, my life easier, because basically there's a state process that's going on, okay? And then there's the medical process that's going on. So the state process can complete itself, but if I don't have medical records, I can't put in your prescription. So if you bring your medical records, then we can do everything at that first visit, and when you walk out the door, all you have to do is wait for that state process to finish. That's how I ideally like to do it. But even if you didn't bring in your medical records, let's say you requested them, and I know how doctors' offices are, I know how the office staff is, so sometimes they don't send them on time. We can still see you, we'll just hunt them down, we'll help you hunt down those medical records so that we can finish the process. It still only takes one visit to do it, though. But I like patients, when they walk out the door, I like them to know that all they have to do is wait for state approval. You're welcome. Were there any other questions? I don't think I see anybody else waving their arms. Okay. You guys are okay. Well, thank you guys so much for having us here. I hope that you enjoyed this movie. You'll really enjoy it if you haven't seen it before. Thank you.